Cap Times Idea Fest 2020 is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors. Presenting sponsor, the Burrish Group at UBS, a financial services firm with global access and a local focus to pursue what matters most for its clients. Major sponsors are HealthX Ventures, backing entrepreneurs who are creating value with digital health solutions. Exact Sciences, pursuing earlier detections and life-changing answers in the fight against cancer. Quartz, health plans built with you in mind. And Madison Gas and Electric, your community energy company whose goal is net zero carbon electricity by 2050. Co-sponsors are Epic Systems and the Godfrey Kahn Law Firm. Other sponsors are Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, Home Savings Bank, Unity Point Health Meritor, Cargo Coffee, and the Forward Theater Company. Media partners are the Wisconsin State Journal and Madison.com, WKOW Channel 27, and Hinckley Productions. Please consider becoming a Cap Times member. Learn more at membership.captimes.com.
Hello, I'm Paul Fanland, editor and publisher of the Capital Times, and I'd like to welcome you to the Cap Times Idea Fest and this discussion of the future of policing in Madison. This is our fourth annual event, but the first we are presenting virtually. Our theme this year is 2020 Changes Everything. Given the local and regional impact of COVID-19, the resulting economic damage, and the impact of the Black Lives Matter movement, there's a lot to talk about, and we think this year's lineup is our best yet. We believe Idea Fest has grown into a signature event on the Madison calendar. It is also an important showcase for the Capital Times, our locally owned century-old journalism brand. If you're not already, we hope you'll consider becoming a Cap Times member. As a member, you'll have access to special Idea Fest programs plus benefits throughout the year. You'll also be supporting an independent and trustworthy local media source at a time when that has never been more important. Learn more at membership.captimes.com. I'd like to thank the Burrish Group at UBS, which is the presenting sponsor of Idea Fest and has been with us since the start. Andy Burrish and Jason Moss have built their asset management firm's stellar reputation by effective investing for Madisonians, but also for investing in Madison. Their generous support of Idea Fest is but one example of their community commitment. The Burrish Group is the sponsor of this discussion about the future of policing in Madison, moderated by former police chief Noble Wray. Again, thank you and welcome.
Well, hello. Welcome to Ideas Fest. We have an excellent panel here. We have Anthony Cooper. Yes. We have Captain Brian Chaney, and we have the mayor with us as well. What we're going to talk about are some of the issues that are impacting America and more importantly, Madison, on issues related to policing. So some of the questions that we have are questions that I'm sure you would be able to address. So one of the questions that I would like to start off with is this. There's a lot of discussion about defunding police. And so my question to each of the panelists would be, to start that off, what does that mean, defunding police from your perspective, and how do you see that impacting here locally? So why don't we start right here with Anthony? What does that mean to you, and how does that connect here locally?
I mean, defunding the police basically means, to me, is the fact of being able to redirect funds back into the community. So that's really what it means. Redirect some of the funds that what the Madison Police or the police department has, and then start, instead of using it to be able to hire more police officers, using some of those funds to put back into programming and other community access or grants that are out there, and then try to figure out ways how we can kind of to build a different type of structure.
So it's more of a kind of a reinvestment.
Right, exactly.
Mayor, what are your thoughts on this idea of defunding police? If you look at Seattle, you look at Portland, you look all over, in Milwaukee, all of these issues are just resonating out there. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think there's a couple of things that interact in this space, right? And so one is just the stark reality that cities don't have money, right? And that our budgets are really tight and getting worse, frankly, particularly in 2020, because of all of the challenges we've had. And so I think that people feel like, and perhaps rightfully so, that there aren't enough resources invested into community. And so you start looking at, where is the money going, and can you shift, right? So but I think that if you asked 5 people what it meant to defund the police, you get 5 different answers. The way that I think about it is less, frankly, about money and more about how are we creating public safety, right? And so how are we thinking about what is actually the tool that is going to create more public safety? And I imagine we can get into that question in a deeper way in this conversation. But I think that the police are one tool, or maybe multiple tools, but there are multiple other tools that cities need to use as well. And so, ultimately, I do feel like it's a question of where do we invest going forward, and which tools are we using more and which tools are we using less?
More or less. So let me segue over. We've got Brian Chaney, a captain of the Madison Police Department. The mayor kind of alluded to this in a way. She really started to bring this issue more to fruition. There's the question of reinvestment. There's a question of defunding, all of those things. But then there's also this issue of maintaining public safety. Where do you see that pull, that push? And I think the mayor was starting to get into that. What are your thoughts on that from the Madison Police Department standpoint?
Right. So let me just first say that I agree with both the mayor and Mr. Cooper on sort of, there's a lot of factors involved here, right? And we too have seen 5, 6 different people offer 5 or 6 different opinions on what the concept of defunding means. We've been doing a lot of time listening, and I think that that's what the community is asking us to do right now, and patiently awaiting on what the decision would be with our involvement in discussions like this as to what type of police this community wants to have. What are the roles and responsibilities you want your police to have? Now, some of the barriers may include statutory requirements that the police have to act on certain situations, or are required to respond in certain situations under law. It is our obligation as law enforcement officers of this state. But others, we've taken on that responsibility because we are one of the few 24/7 hour service providers in this community. And so I think when we speak on defunding the police, I agree that maybe there should be a discussion on responsibility, and perhaps who else might have the responsibility to fulfill a task that the police have historically had to address.
There's a growing discussion right now out on race and how people feel safe, how African Americans feel safe, driving home, driving around. Anyone that has grown up in America that's African American, that's an issue that's just resonating out there. I'd like to hear your thoughts on. Is this something that we should drill down more into in Madison? Where are we in Madison as it relates to race and policing? It's a wide open question.
Yeah. So, I mean, as far as, I feel as though that you said a couple different things in saying that, right? I think when it comes to, and this is in Madison, or not in Madison, just as far as in a nation, is the fact that when have any black man or black woman, Latinx, or so on, felt as though a person of color has actually felt comfortable around police. That's a challenge within itself, right? So when we talk about Madison, I think that where Madison is trying to do some unique things, But also you got to think about all generationally, all the hurt that is there. You can't forget about that. You have to constantly go back to that in order to move forward. And where I feel as though a lot of times some folks or some people may believe, say, all right, let's just go ahead and just start over. Let's just start now, from now and go forward. No, we have to keep addressing what has already happened to go forward. And it kind of sounds like a little maze-ish, even answering that, but that's what we have to keep addressing things, and also being able to pull the right people to our community who can help. But there are people that are in our community now that everyone's trying to do the best that they can do. But again, this did not just happen overnight. So it's going to take some time, and everyone has to be patient. Everyone has to be able to know that, hey, look, this is. We have to keep implementing new frameworks into the next generation. So hopefully the next generation is not going to keep dealing with the same stuff what has already taken place.
Oh, really good, really good.
Yeah.
Mayor, your thoughts on the issue of race, policing?
And I want to pick up on something that Coop said, and that is the question of historical and generational trauma, right? And I think that one of the things that I would like us to look at here in Madison is trauma-informed policing and trauma-informed public safety overall, right? Because if you're not acknowledging, as you say, where people are at in their interactions, there's no hope of moving forward, right? There's no hope of healing if you're not acknowledging where people are. So that's one thing that I want to lift up. Another thing that I want to lift up is what you said is this question of how many things are we asking a single department to do? And is that appropriate? Is that fair? Are those the right things, right? And so, we're having a conversation now in the community about the question of behavioral and mental health calls and who should respond to them. And I think that, that we've seen models from across the country where it is not a uniformed police officer who makes that initial response with some success. So we're looking at the Cahoots model from Eugene, Oregon. There's a similar model in Denver, a similar model in Portland. And we're going to pilot, I hope, something here in Madison that will be able to essentially take a piece of that work from the police department and move it somewhere else. And that's, when we talk about defunding, right, that's what I'm most interested in, right, is can we look at what have we asked the police department to do? And are there pieces of it that we can say, okay, actually, officers don't get the right training or the right support or have the right resources to respond to this set of things. Who else could do that, right? How could we best respond to that as a community? And so that ultimately means that we have to look at data, right? We have to look at what are the calls, right? What's the volume? How is it dealt with now? Is there another way to deal with it? And so that leads me to the last thing that I wanted to mention here, which is the question of data, right? And so we know that there are disproportionate outcomes with respect to race in the criminal justice system. And this is something that Madison has looked at to a certain extent and has tried to parse out throughout the entire criminal justice system, where are those disparities arising, right? And so, I think that is ongoing and important work. One of the things that I'd like to see us do better, just specifically in the city, is really parsing out data with respect to race and ethnicity, both in terms of arrests, but also in terms of interaction, and to parse that by geography, by shift. There's a lot of ways that you can look at that to start to see where are those disparities arising from. And how do we look in along the whole spectrum from even pre-interaction with the system throughout the whole system to make sure that we're trying to fill all of those places where there are disparities and address them. And I don't think you can do that without good data. And so I think it takes really looking at the data and really making sure that we're digging into all those different places and asking the right questions to make sure that we're getting at those disparities.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
But
it's
worth it.
important work.
Important and worth it,
Yes.
and I think easier now that we have better data systems.
So let me pivot, a continuation of what you're saying. I mean, there's this quantitative information. You've got to do the analysis.
Yep.
You've got to do the hard work, drilling down. But from a policing standpoint, also, you have this qualitative bit where it's not just disparities, which we do struggle with, but what is the impact? How do people feel about their police? Qualitatively, what are your thoughts in terms of how, what does a Madisonian understand about policing in Madison? It's not just a qualitative issue, and so just one side is the numbers, the other side is qualitatively. So just a thought, your ideas on that, Brian.
Yeah, you bet. But I don't want to miss that earlier question and point you made about being black in America. It is not easy to be black in the United States of America.
Thank you.
And people who choose my profession and work for the community, I think we need to understand that. And it's our job to make sure that we provide equal level service to everyone, which I can tell you is part of our core values. Madison Police Department strives to maintain and continue that. But we have to recognize that a problem in this system exists, and we are one facet or one aspect of that system, right? So I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned that.
I appreciate that.
And then to your point about the qualitative importance of the data and quantitative, it starts with recruitment. You have to hire people that are caring, compassionate folks who either have had personal experience in their lives that they can relate to, or they have that open heart understanding that there are people going through different things in life that are different than themselves, and they can do their best to relate to that. And I think that probably the best equation or the best comparison I can give is having conversations about what it's like to be black in America to some of my white friends, right? Truly, probably, you don't have a good sense of what it's like to be black in America unless you're black in America. And so I think that that's important to have these discussions and to find people who are compassionate and caring and empathetic enough to do this job. Because that's where it matters. Those interactions and that point of contact that you have with community members, regardless of race, but race is important as a factor, is important. And those dialogues and how one feels after interacting with a police officer in this community matters. And we need to hold, and we do, and we need to continue to maintain the level of standard that is important and what is expected by those interactions from our police officers. It starts with recruiting and retaining those officers so that we can have that trust that is so pivotal and so important and critical in our community between what you hire us to do, which we wield a lot of power that you authorize the police to have, and those in which we serve. So we work for you, and I can't reiterate that enough in my conversations that I've had with community members, in my personal life. We're called public servants, right? And even though we're on the topic of race, that servant part gets a little tricky sometimes, but we serve you, we serve the public. And so I think that that's important to recognize that those conversations are critical. How you feel about those interactions matters, regardless of the outcome. Oftentimes, Noble, and you know this obviously from being chief, we come into people's lives at the lowest point, right? We come during crises. We, as something as what we would consider a simple contact, could be something that resonates and somebody remembers for the rest of their life, to include a traffic stop, right? I might be impacted by a person of color, and I have when I take this uniform off, by an officer's contact with me. I might come into it with a certain sense of feeling and mistrust already because I am a person of color, and I have had either personally experienced those or I have friends or family that have experienced those. And when you talk about generational, it is generational. And so I'm speaking to you, acknowledging it from personal experience, but I can tell you that these conversations are also happening within the Madison Police Department. That training surrounding these discussions and cultural appreciation, understanding, and unconscious bias. Those are all happening. We need to build on that and continue to do that while we talk about issues that we're facing today.
Got it. Okay. No, that was well thought out.
Yeah.
Let me ask a question that I think is on the minds of a lot of people in Madison. There's been here recently, not only in Madison, but across the United States, certain cities have seen a spike in violent crime. And I know that you do a lot of work in the community related to that. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on what do you see happening related to violent crime, youth violence, et cetera. Just your perspective on that, Anthony. I think you probably have an insight that most people may not have.
So it's a couple of things that I think I want to say is the fact that people are hurting and people are also trying to figure it out, right? People are trying to figure out from trying to navigate their ways through different programs and trying to see what programs can help, and if, because even with those programs, they get tapped out as well. So at some point, it's kind of like, all right, well, my job hasn't started back up yet. I still have to figure out, I need a roof over my head, so I need to be able to pay rent. Or now, and then also another kicker to it, if we're being honest and putting this out here, is the fact that even with some of the youth programs, yes, it's great that, okay, you have parents for the parents who can actually, that have a computer, who have access to be able to support their children on through virtually, but that's still, that's another frustration and hurt, because you got to think about some of the parents who don't necessarily have that education to be able to support their children the way that they want to. So all of that, to me, again, it kind of goes right back to when we talk about trauma, right? So because trauma happens in the school as well. That we don't necessarily always talk about. When you may have this parent that may, to the teacher or the principal may say, oh, I just don't know how to communicate with this parent. And now this parent is upset and yelling at everyone. And now you have the police involved or whatever. Where is that really coming from? So who do you have that's in the community who is also addressing that? Someone from whether if it's a program or someone who can actually go and talk to that parent and be the middle person in that situation as well. Because everyone out here needs some type of support.
Yeah.
It's not enough. From the local nonprofits to even other community support groups, other community navigators. It's not enough. This is especially right now because of COVID. So it just adds that other layer to stuff. Now you have these with the kids that are basically out here trying to figure things out, because if mom is working or if dad is working, they're at home trying to figure stuff out. They've never been at home all day. Now, what is it? You got kids raising kids now, right? So let me go ahead and hang out with my buddy, and then next thing, for some, because not all kids out here stealing cars, but what does it say? Idle mind is the devil's worst place, right? So at some point, if we don't get them into something, they're going to get into something. Yeah. And even with the mix of all this stuff that is going on with COVID, I have to mention that we still have to do something where it is hands-on. We can't take a hands-off approach.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Your thoughts on the spike in violence?
I think Coop is right on. This is something that we're seeing in cities all across the nation. And I think that the combination of the COVID-19 pandemic and all of the implications of that around not being able to be with people, programs shutting down, school being virtual, and then everything that's going on in the economy, right? And people losing jobs. And this just comes smack dab together into a situation that creates more violence, I think. And at the same time, it's exposing the cracks that were already there, right?
Exactly.
And what we're seeing is that our system was already inequitable, right? And we were just sort of papering over it, right? And now with COVID-19, you can't ignore it anymore. And so our challenge, when this virus hit, I think a lot of us, myself included, thought, okay, like this is a couple of weeks, right? Like this is a month or two, right? And we're what,
Plural.
8 months in, and no end in sight, right? And so I think that our collective challenge is to realize that this is how we live now, right? Like, we're going to be wearing masks for a long time, right? And we're going to have to think about transmission of disease for a long time, and we have to start figuring out how to do the things that must be done in a safe way, because we can't not be with kids, right? We can't not have young people have something, not even productive to do, but just like healthy and fun, you know? And so this is our challenge, right? And I think that, you know, as a society, I think we're really struggling with it.
I want to come back to you with another question.
Yeah.
I'm just dying, but I want to give Brian an opportunity to respond. What are you guys seeing? Put the whole violence thing in perspective, if you could. What's happening in Madison? Is this a spike that's abnormal, or is this typical, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, this is abnormal.
Okay.
This is not what we would typically see in Madison. But I think the mayor highlighted all the varying factors that are involved in adding to what we're seeing. And it's unfortunate, what we've seen as with respect to gun violence in particular. There's not a day or shift that goes by that I don't read or hear or know of something involving gun violence in this town. To include shots fired and officers and investigators picking up casings or reports of shots fired. And we have to get our handle on that.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of things that Mr. Cooper talked about and the mayor talked about that play into that. I mean, you do have this followership. You do have this philosophy of kids might be bored at home, or there might not be enough supervision. Kind of segueing back into our first question about the defunding concept, which I would argue is shifting responsibility, right? That should not be the police's job, is what it sounds like the argument is, to intervene in those situations in which you have two kids bored at home looking for something to do and kind of steering in the direction they shouldn't be doing. Perhaps that should be somebody else that intervenes before they get to the point where police are involved. Absolutely. But I do feel police have a role, right, in society. And what's really challenging is talking about concepts where there are no police.
Right.
I think that is, where do we start with that conversation? You're talking to a cop who joined this profession knowing that I was going to be out there helping people and hoping to save lives and make lives better for people. And I work with 470 other people that do the same thing. And so it is very sad to see this, what I would call a spike in gun violence and violence in Madison. But Madison's still safe. We still have the vast majority of people in this community are good people that want to live in a safe community and do work with police. What we're talking about is, what is the responsibility of police, and what is the shift now that we are engaged in this conversation in 2020, which in COVID and the economic downfall has been one heck of a year. So now is the time to talk about it. And so let's continue that conversation.
I gotta ask this question. I've been wanting to ask this question, and then I got one for you too, specifically. What has it been like being a mayor during a period of time where you have COVID, where you have all of these things that are occurring, George Floyd, protests? If you could just spend a few minutes, it would be really, I think, really helpful for people to get a feel for you. What has that been like? It's
been really, really hard.
Okay.
In so many ways, right? The community is really hurting. And I ran for mayor to make this city a better place, right? And to be in this position while there's so much pain in the community is just really difficult. It's difficult from a budget standpoint, right? We are, down a tremendous amount of revenue, millions and millions of dollars this year, and have had to, adjust our budget for 2020. We had to fill a, $20 million budget gap for 2021 we're still putting the finishing touches on. So it's been really hard from a financial standpoint, right? It's been hard from the perspective of being an employer and trying to navigate how you keep your employees safe in this situation. And we have about a third of our folks teleworking, and the rest don't have the luxury of doing that. And so we have to figure out how to keep them safe on the job. And 2020 really has felt like just every time you turn around, it's something else.
Yeah.
And it's really, I think, testing our resilience as a community, as a city, as a country. And so far, I have to say that, regardless of how hard it's been personally, I think the city's doing pretty well, and that's because we have great employees.
Yeah.
But it's very difficult, and I think that people need to just remember to breathe and understand that a lot of what we're feeling is because we've been in a pandemic for months and months and months. And that's just hard on everybody.
Wow. Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't get a bird's eye view of what's occurring from your perspective. Anthony, you work with a lot of young people out in the community.
Adults as well.
And adults as well. If there was something that you would like to convey or to say to young people or young men or African American men, what would that be? What advice would you give? So, for example, for me, it is, find someone in your life that you can connect with, that will help you, an adult person that you can connect with. So, what would that be for you? What would you say if you had the opportunity to just speak to all young people, especially African American men in the city?
So something what I would say, and I may put a little spin on your question if that's okay.
Oh, please do.
Is the fact that first I want to probably address the men and the women that are in our community and say, like, look, our kids are hurting. We need to figure out different ways, unique ways to support them. One person can't do it. 10 people can't do it by themselves. We need a multitude of different organizations and different people to actually jump and say, hey, look, I'm ready to stand up and do whatever I can to support. And then, and also to our younger people, to let them know that, hey, we are here to support y'all for the long haul, not just for a program. I think a lot of our kids get so, this may sound crazy, but I think a lot of our kids are just programmed out, right? And the same thing even for some of our adults as well. They're programmed out. So we have to really start addressing things as a village and saying, hey, look, let's get this going. Let's support as much as possible. When there's challenges that are going on, let's have that conversation. It's not just one person that's out here. We have to do it together. We need teams around every young person that is out here. Teams, not just one. I'm not talking about like five persons to just one kid. I'm talking about a good 10 to 15 just to one child at times, because now we have to figure out different ways to make sure that, because it can start with us, but how do we have to make sure that it's going to keep going, right? Because at some point, I'm going to die, right? Yeah. At some point, someone else, and so we have to make sure that things don't just die with us. So that's the whole purpose of us, all of us, I assume. We have to figure out different ways of how to make sure that we're connecting the dots with not only just the organizations that are out here, the business leaders that are out here, our local nonprofits, and also even start looking at some of the other things that are going on outside of Madison as well, and making those things happen. And we can't wait. So that's the other thing, If the discussion, we're still having the same discussion, and you're still asking me the same question next year, we failed already.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you added women.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Young girls into that.
Our girls are out here hurting just as much as our young boys. And a lot of times they don't necessarily want to either not talking about it or don't necessarily see it.
Let me, how am I doing on time, or where are we?
You take a little break.
Take a little break? Okay.
Cap Times Idea Fest 2020 is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors. Presenting sponsor, the Burrish Group at UBS, a financial services firm with global access and a local focus to pursue what matters most for its clients. Major sponsors are HealthX Ventures, backing entrepreneurs who are creating value with digital health solutions. Exact Sciences, pursuing earlier detections and life-changing answers in the fight against cancer. Quartz, health plans built with you in mind. And Madison Gas and Electric, your community energy company whose goal is net zero carbon electricity by 2050. Co-sponsors are Epic Systems and the Godfrey Kahn Law Firm. Other sponsors are Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, Home Savings Bank, Unity Point Health Meritor, Cargo Coffee, and the Forward Theater Company. Media partners are the Wisconsin State Journal and Madison.com, WKOW Channel 27, and Hinckley Productions. Please consider becoming a Cap Times member. Learn more at membership.captimes.com.
So, Captain, there's someone that's
Is this
going
the
to
part I
try and
shifted my
have
seat?
my job in the past.
Yes.
What would you like to see in a new chief?
You know, that's interesting. There's a lot that we're eager for, and let me just first start off by saying I give a lot of credit to those who've held acting positions on our department, such as acting Chief Wall. I mean, that is something that because him, being the most senior acting or assistant chief at the time, he took on that role and responsibility in 2020 when we're having all of these issues. There's a lot of opportunity for a new chief in our town, and I think that we're going to find out here pretty soon what the community wants in their new chief. There's something to be said about experience in Madison. I think that is important, or having an understanding and appreciation of Madison. Let's face it, we're a little unique in this town, and that's okay, and that's all right to be unique. But there is something to be said about a new perspective and fresh perspective as well. And so maybe striking a balance of that is ideal in a new chief. But for certain, the chief sets the standard, right? And sets the tone. And so we need she or he to be that person that definitely delivers that for the rank and file of the police department. We're excited and we're eager to have new leadership appointed over us. And all of us, my colleagues and I, are looking forward to working with she or he in the near future. But I think we're ready. It's been some time now, and I understand that COVID, the pandemic has delayed that, and there needs to be, especially now more than ever, a good, thorough process to make sure that enough community input is received, and whomever takes on the job is the right person for the task. I don't envy that person. I don't envy you having to do it under. It's a very difficult job, having not done it myself, but I certainly can appreciate the difficulties of that job. And as we sit and watch presidents, and the one I can think of just because of his dark hair, Obama, starting from office day one, and then looking at him at the end of his tenure there, it ages you, certainly, but in a good way, hopefully, right? You look great, Chief. You look great. You look great, just like day one. No, but I think it's important to just, we're being very patient, and I would urge the community to continue to do what it's doing, and trying to recruit and identify who the best woman or man is for the job. And notice I keep emphasizing the woman. I think that is an important key factor as well, is bringing somebody who doesn't necessarily look like the majority of the people in this community. A minority or a woman would be great, or whomever is qualified for that job.
Really good. Mayor, your thoughts on that, and I will couch yours into saying that the chief's role is understanding inside the department, outside the department, having a national perspective, but also having a sense of self. He or she, their readiness to be able to do this. So what are you thinking about when you're thinking about, the opportunity to work with a new chief that would be coming on board?
Well, I think I'm also really eager to get the new chief, and I think it's a huge opportunity for our community. We talked earlier about the sort of the breakdown in trust
Right.
Between the community and the police department, and I think a new chief is an opportunity to reset that, right? And so I do think it's really important that the next chief understand that she is the chief for the community as well as for the department, for the whole city, not just leading, the force. And that's really important, that there be a focus on trust building, on learning the community and understanding the community and having the relationships there that are going to be really critical going forward. I mentioned trauma-informed policing. I think I'd love to have somebody who understands that as a concept and is able to think about how we really do that here in Madison. I mean, Madison has I think a really strong progressive history in our department of adopting community policing, of being part of founding the Police Executive Research Forum. I mean, we have a history of trying to make the profession of policing better, and I think we should be building on that. And so, I'm hopeful for somebody. Obviously, it's the Police and Fire Commission's decision. But I'm hopeful for somebody who really wants to be a partner and really wants to collaborate, not just with me and my office, but with every single department and beyond, right? Within, with the community, with the schools, with the UW, with Madison College, that is really looking to form partnerships around, creating public safety, which again is more than policing. But that's a piece of it, right? And so somebody who can understand that biggest picture and how the department fits into it and can fit into it in the future, that would be my ideal. It's a lot to ask, I understand, but that's what I would hope for.
It's an important position. What attributes would you like to see in a chief?
I think he or she. Definitely, I would like to be able to see someone who's willing to get out there and work with the community. And a lot of times, and working with the community, I'm not talking about someone who's behind the scenes, someone who was actually. I feel if I had little kids, my child needs to know you. I think that's important because I feel as though. Again, it kind of goes right back into being able to change the idea of who an officer is and what a chief is, right? And so I don't necessarily feel like a lot of our community members are even really tied into what that position even stands for, right? Because, it was something I believe, Brian, you had mentioned it as far as, because you also have to kind of really draw back and think about which community is that person really going to be connected to, right? And I think all of that has to change. You need a chief, someone who's trying to at least bring the communities together to be able to really have true conversations, right? Conversations with action behind it. And again, those actions have to be something that I'm not saying it has to happen within the next week, but within that month, it needs to be some planning, and then next thing, it has to go into implementation. I think I said that right.
You got it right.
So, because a lot of times I think even when we're trying to look at data and things of that nature, a whole year now already went past. And so again, if people are hurting right now, people are in critical situations right now, and I understand that it can't happen. Won't be able to make things happen the next day, and change is not going to happen, that fast as far as community change. But we need active, and I say active where we are being active on a regular basis of saying this has to happen today or this has to happen. We have to make sure we're having these conversations, but then also the action behind that is, okay, within the next month, this is what we are going to do as a community. Are you with us or not?
Oh, wow.
So those are the things, I mean, time waits for no one, right?
Absolutely.
So, and someone who's committed to this community.
So my next question is a protest-related question, and I'm going to start with Anthony. We were on the panel at Madison 365 at one point in time. We served on the panel, and I started the panel discussion off saying, growing up in Milwaukee, I hated police. That's the way I grew up, and I remember you saying, "Hate is a strong word," but when your mom and daddy getting arrested. That's what I felt. I'm just being honest. That's where it was. I love this profession now. I mean, I believe in it with all my heart and soul. So I've done a 360.
Right.
So my question to you, as a child growing up, sitting at home, wondering if my parents were going to need to be bailed out of prison, out of jail, not prison, but jail, for protesting, open house here at the Capitol, open house going across the viaduct in Milwaukee. And I set that as a backdrop. What have we done right in Madison related to protests, and how can we improve in terms of how we've handled it? Now, if you want Brian to go first.
I think that may be, well, you know what, because, if you know me well enough that no problem, I have no problem with taking on a challenge, right? So what have we done right? I think right now, as what we have done right of being able to allow people like myself and others being able to at least be a part of the protests, so when there are challenges, with the hope of us being able to de-escalate them when they happen. That's something that I feel that we have done right. Something else that we have done right when there's no violence that is involved, of just being able to just allow the protests to happen and being able to navigate that and allow, because even the fact of, and I'm pretty sure law enforcement does not know, like, oh, okay, hey, we know exactly they're gonna go down this street and so on and so forth, of just being able to let people protest, but then also kind of give us, because I've been out there doing the protest, also some protection in some senses as well, where if blocking off the streets and just saying, okay, hey, if you guys are going that way, we just want to just make sure and not intervening, not intervening when people are blocking the streets, and just being able to allow people just to be able to be their authentic selves in that moment. I think some of those things have been done well. Some of the things that I think may need more conversation about of how to address when there are situations that happen. And I think that again that's a community. We have to address that as a community. So when there is, I don't know if I can say this on TV or not, but so when there are situations, so just kind of making sure that the right people are connected to be able to help. Yes. That's it. I think, and being okay with that. We, folks who are in the community, we understand that law enforcement, they have a job to do, but then also let's figure out ways how we can navigate that system together without, especially during a protest time, without things getting too far off or getting too deep where someone now may not be, may not go to prison or whatever the case may be. I guess that's probably the way, that's probably the best way for me to answer that right now.
Right.
So
who wants to grab this one?
I'll go. Can I leave you? Can I leave you the anchor?
Yeah, sounds good.
So we're not a perfect agency. I work with a lot of wonderful people, and our officers do great work. And Let me tell you, they're tired. There's long hours, long days, lots of yelling, lots of what feels like personal insults and profanity thrown at you. But the goal is, as hard as it is not to take it personally, as very challenging as somebody's pointing at you and saying, you are this, you disgust me, you this. It's very hard, but you kind of have to try to take a step back and say, this anger is expressed at what's happening in society. And this anger is not expressed necessarily to Brian, the person who's going to go home to his family that night and still has this memory of being called these names and the Uncle Tom, etc. That's challenging to break from, but you just have to take a step back and say, there's more involved here than what's happening on the front line. So I want to commend the work, when you talk about the good work and the things we can improve on, the good work that the women and men of the department have done to this day in being patient and being respectful. We're not perfect, right? As I started my spiel. What I think that we need to continue to do is work with people like Coop. Work with our community leaders. You know, we hire people that want to engage in conversation. We don't hire robots for that reason. We want people to be independent thinkers and to be comfortable with dialoguing people who disagree or who are angry or who might not want them there. That's what they've done and do every day. Police officers do, is engage people. When you're the subject of the protest, it makes it very challenging to engage people. We are cut out of that conversation 99% of the time. And so we've had to rely on community partners and having conversations with others to try to see what we can do to make folks who want to express their right to disagree or to raise objection to systematic problems and failures, but that they can do so safely. And so our job is to make sure that we protect folks their First Amendment right and that they do so safely. Now, we have this little thing called permits, and I used to be part of this permit committee in this town. Everything what we're seeing, for the most part, is are acts of civil disobedience, right? Where no permits typically, generally, I can't think of one necessarily that has been taken out and formally approved, has been issued by the city for all of these protests which we are seeing, and daily, with the exception maybe a handful of days, that we've not seen some sort of active protest in which a street is being blocked or traffic has to be diverted. But we are supporting the safety of those people who engage in acts of civil disobedience such as that. All of us, none of us are historians. Some of us might have gotten PhDs in history. That's the type of police department you guys have here, but I'm not. But I do remember the civil rights era. I wasn't born then, I was born just after, but I have learned from history and have an appreciation of civil disobedience and what's right in society. So your police department understands that too. And so what we've done right, I think, is support that as best we can. What we can do a better job is perhaps the communication angle and try to figure out how best we can communicate with those persons who are protesting the most visible sign of oppression in their eyes, which would be the uniform because of their personal experience or others. We are still struggling with that a little bit and trying to get our handle on how best to communicate with those folks. But message received loud and clear. I walk past 100 feet of lettering on the roadway that says defund police, right? Every time I go into work. Message received loud and clear. Now it's best, in our opinion, to say, okay, well, what are the next steps? How can we best move on, not forget, not continue as normal and forget that 2020 ever happened, but where do we go from here now that we've received this message? So I can go on and on about things I think that we can do better, but I can do that in a lot of things in life. But certainly those are the two things I can highlight: success and things we need to probably work on in the future.
What we were talking about was kind of what we could do more of or less of or improve or with protests. And I wanted to give you an opportunity, Mayor, to ask how some things in hindsight that we could have improved on or worked on or that we did well? I mean, just give you an opportunity to weigh in on that.
So, I mean, to start with, I think what Coop and Brian both said is right. I would highlight actually watching, and I'm sort of a level up, right, on all of this, and watching our Emergency Operations Center and seeing the coordination between different departments and support. You mentioned the blocking of traffic, right? So that's police department, but it's also our traffic engineers, and so watching that coordination has been, I think we do that well. And then also, watching the police department command center learn, right? It has been almost every day, right? Yeah. And so watching them learn day after day to try and give a better response, right? To try and de-escalate, to try and keep everybody safe, to try and anticipate what are the triggers for violence and how do we avoid them, to try and work with community. I think all of that has been pretty well done. I do think that there is a set of questions around use of force and understanding what we as a community feel like is appropriate. And that conversation is happening, right, at the City Council. I do also think that communication is key. And I want to add on to that transparency, right? Because I think one of the things that our community certainly, but frankly, communities all across the country are realizing is that we don't know how our police departments work. We don't know what the standard operating procedures are. We don't know whether or not you can use a chokehold legally in Madison. No, you can't. But we don't know as a community, right? And so trying to go above and beyond to provide that transparency, to make sure that things are available in language that people can understand, to communicate what our standards are, I think is important. And we live in such a connected society that, and yet our jurisdictions are unconnected, right? So we perceive things to happen across the country.
Good point.
And where a police department has done something, and we assume that it's the same thing here, and it may be a completely different situation, right? And so more transparency, more communication, more information available to the community, more community relationships, so that we have those opportunities to de-escalate and we have those avenues of communication. I think that's what we need to be doing better. And again, we have an opportunity with a new chief coming in, I think, to really reset, to look at all of that. We have an opportunity with the Office of the Independent Monitor and the Civilian Oversight Board to start asking some of those bigger questions and to support work around the standard operating procedures and to work through that, 177 recommendations from the ad hoc task force. I mean, there's a lot of work that's been done. And there's the opportunity for a lot more work. And I think that we're headed in that direction. And a lot of it comes from this urgency out of the protests.
Really good. Wow. I didn't think we'd get all of that out of that. It was an excellent response. I'll start with you with this one, Mayor. As a city alder, former city alder, you've had a chance to review budgets, and what's the difference between your perspective? What have you really just jumped out at you as I'm an alder and I'm a mayor?
So now full transparency.
Full transparency.
When I was alder, Noble was chief, and we may have butted heads a few times. But I've been thinking about that because I feel like every perspective is valid, right? But I feel like there was so much I didn't know when I was on the council, and that I have a broader perspective on now. And part of it is approaching it from the executive. You have to think about it as an employer, in addition to being a policymaker, and so that's a different perspective, right? And then there is, ultimately, like, yes, Alders review the budget, but it's my budget that I put together and have to get adopted by the council, and so there's a deeper level of scrutiny that goes in there, and I think so that'll be the big change for me is just that there's it's a broader perspective, and also ultimately while I think that the community does hold the city council as a whole accountable, everybody is looking to me and my office to fix all of these things, including the pandemic, by the way, and which obviously is not going to happen. Sorry. Wish I could, but there is, I think, a different level of weight that comes with that office.
Wow, I can only imagine, having worked with so many prior mayors before. Brian, I was just recently in New Hampshire, and I was talking to roughly 30 chiefs, and I may have mentioned this to you in one of our prior conversations. I asked a question. I said, would you join the profession right now knowing what you know now? And if so, please raise your hand. No one raised their hand. Would you join the profession knowing what you know now?
I have a lot of conversations about that very question. From my perspective, from my seat, I joined this department, the only police department I've ever worked for, right after 9/11. Like I did, on the heels of 9/11. And as you can understand, the sentiment was different, right? The support, what I would call support, was different, felt different. The funding was there, right? I think I may have been hired under a COPS grant, right? So having that as my first experience for the first 5, 6, 7 years of my career, and now facing the unprecedented scrutiny and evaluation and the level of discussions that we're having now is a challenge. We hired a class of 50 this year in May, right? So the kind of vibe was already starting to come to that point, and then May happened, and obviously that was I would consider the start off, the breaking point. Especially as it related to the protest and George Floyd. I'm not going to skip around your question, except to say the answer is yes, I would join, while I'm looking forward to retirement, right? So
the best of both worlds.
In the meantime, I'm going to recruit like heck and challenge people to step up. This is not an easy job, not an easy profession, but it's a noble profession. Chief Noble Wray. It is a very rewarding profession with its challenges, and so we're recruiting women and men who want to do the job, who want to serve the community, and are going to be okay with the scrutiny that comes with the territory. But yes, I would do it again. It took some time to come to that conclusion, to that question, but I think I would.
We are at a point where I think we're about out of time. First of all, let me just say, in case it's still recording, thank you, Captain, for being here, Mayor, for being here, and Anthony. I had a question for you at the end and couldn't get to it, all right. But really do thank you all for your participation in Idea Fest today. Right. Thank you.
Not a problem.
You're
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cap Times Idea Fest 2020 is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors. Presenting sponsor, the Burrish Group at UBS, a financial services firm with global access and a local focus to pursue what matters most for its clients. Major sponsors are HealthX Ventures, backing entrepreneurs who are creating value with digital health solutions. Exact Sciences, pursuing earlier detections and life-changing answers in the fight against cancer. Quartz, health plans built with you in mind. And Madison Gas and Electric, your community energy company whose goal is net zero carbon electricity by 2050. Co-sponsors are Epic Systems and the Godfrey Kahn Law Firm. Other sponsors are Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, Home Savings Bank, Unity Point Health Meritor, Cargo Coffee, and the Forward Theater Company. Media partners are the Wisconsin State Journal and Madison.com, WKOW Channel 27, and Hinckley Productions. Please consider becoming a Cap Times member. Learn more at membership.captimes.com.